Hello, I'm Eugenia Accra, ambassador of AS Company, show you how to work with AS Company Opium Light mineral pigments. The mineral line is indeed quite small, consisting of 6 of the most basic and natural shades, and for this model, we have chosen a mix of 2 shades, M6 and M4. In fact, indeed, the time has long passed when mineral pigments were once difficult to apply, and you had to use a particular technique to carefully lay down these minerals. If we consider the Ice Company Opium Light line, these are the mineral pigments that are so finely dispersed and, due to their fine dispersion, apply perfectly almost from the first pass. You don't need to apply any specific pressure for this. We will work gently on the skin in the same way, achieving a powdery effect and getting very nice healed results and beautiful, luxurious remnants. We need a small marking to slightly determine the points where the gradient will stretch. Today, we will be creating an extremely beautiful powdery gradient stretch. Now, we will mark the apex point with a red pen. We can very easily place auxiliary points directly from the apex point like this. Next, from the very beginning of our brow to the highest apex point, we also draw our line, thus creating a triangle. This ultimately means we will end up with 3 geometric shapes. These are just supplementary points, meaning this place will, in fact, be the most voluminous in this context. Set it, excellent. And we also carefully and precisely separate this remaining top part into 2 equal parts, drawing a dip like this, creating an airy corner. So, accordingly, here we will have a density slightly below average, and here it will be practically rarefied air. So this is how our sketch will look. We will duplicate it on the second eyebrow. Our auxiliary sketch is now ready and complete. We now have the tail triangle, the triangle near the lower brow border, the middle shade, the halftone, and the sparse airy stroke, all in place. Now, we will discuss in detail how to apply this in various contexts. Today, we are using the Ice Company Ice Hero device. It's a small, cool, and very effective little machine. Next, the Ambition block. It's quite light and maneuverable. Together, they create the perfect set. Next, the Ice Company needle for securing the primary contour attachment 01 RLLT. These are the very famous needles with a thin, long tip that significantly reduce your pigment consumption and improve performance. I set the working speed to 5.0. The needle protrusion is 2.5 millimeters. This is comfortable for me. If I feel the need to increase the protrusion, I will do so. The first task is to secure our contour. We will secure it along the lower boundary and from the tail to the apex point. This will carefully guarantee that you do not lose your beautiful fix. So, we begin securing our perfect, thin contour precisely. I am working on the near eyebrow. I start the securing from the very beginning of the eyebrow. How do we do it? To ensure the securing is done without any harsh entry or clear boundary, we make a slight sweeping motion, slightly. And we aim, that is, we first take a swing, aim, and then swing again and start our stroke. That is, we take a swing. Do not enter the skin immediately, a gentle, soft entry, then return quite slowly and hit this line again. We are now securing our contour and absolutely do not forget to examine it thoroughly and completely, as well as carefully, thoroughly, and meticulously. Excellent work and deliberate. We carefully extend the brow area to the forehead region in a manner like this, ensuring that we create a suitable and effective working surface for our purposes. Took another swing with a strong grip, hit it with precision, and rolled it with great force. As you can see, I am working with the tip of the needle, barely touching the skin, and due to its fine dispersion, the pigment already penetrates the skin beautifully. 2 marks. Secured safely. Now we are doing the same process from the apex point. An exceedingly thin fixative to avoid losing the especially delicate tip of the needle. It's a very easy process to go too deep here. The skin in the temple area is extremely thin, so we always ensure that the needle enters only at the tip, very carefully and precisely. Now we need to check our fixative to make sure we don't lose our sketch. Here's a small, thin story that is. You can see it and enjoy it. The main thing is that you can see your fixative material, so you don't lose the sketch. It's very important. Repeat the same process with the second eyebrow. Turn the client slightly towards you. It should be as comfortable as possible for you to work. I slightly adjust the brow to a more horizontal position, removing the possibility of these curves. This is slightly more comfortable for me. We make another stroke a bit. And with such very forward movements, quite slowly and gradually, I proceed step by step to carefully secure it. I hit the line precisely and with precision, carefully. I turn the brow inside out again, stretch it very carefully and extremely thoroughly, and look for a point of support. Stretched it carefully in 3 directions and went over the lower contour precisely. We start the far brow with a careful, precise stroke towards ourselves, that is, from the tail, gently. Don't forget, as we move towards the brow's beginning, we make an exit so the start isn't blunt. Ensure initial strokes are light and build up gradually. From the tail, slightly turn the brow, find the support point, and stretch in 3 directions with 3 fingers. This helps create a natural curve. Then pick up from the tail and move to the apex point at the needle's tip. Check fixation to ensure everything is symmetrical. Take your time with each step for the best results. Patience and precision are key to creating natural-looking brows. Lee. We are starting our coloring. We are without anesthesia, quite comfortable. What kind of stroke is this? That is, we are now working superficially in the same way, touching the skin and starting from the lower boundary, hitting the lower boundary in the same way, and using a pendulum stroke to lay down our corner. This fan-like stroke converges at one point of the tail, and we move from bottom to top and back from top to bottom. Your task is to work with a stroke as if you are stroking. If you show it here, it feels like you are not embedding the needle and shading intradermally, but you have a micro protrusion. Be sure to practice the stroke pendulum technique. We touch the needle with just the very tip, creating the sound. That is, we should hear a slightly more pronounced crunch, just a little bit more, just a little bit more. Once again, from the lower boundary, we carefully capture the lower boundary, that is, the contour, and go again with a correct stroke, spreading precisely from one point to our little corner, moving slightly forward. And the block overlay will be no less than 50%. Additionally, we ensure that every step is meticulously followed, ensuring precision and accuracy. That is, we work in one area, in a specific domain, for quite a long time and move forward quite slowly. Again the contour and near contour, then securely and firmly hold in place the contour and near contour neatly. We stay in one place, we hold in one spot for a while, almost for a count of 3. We move gradually and carefully from the bottom to the very top, reach the uppermost boundary, and capture it. And go again from top to bottom in a systematic and thorough manner. This way, we carefully fill in our entire tail. Once again, the lower boundary, I slightly go beyond our red boundary with a block, but in doing so, I will create a smooth gradient transition, slightly. Lower boundary, contour, near contour. We stay in one place for quite a long time, almost like a pendulum at 3, creating the density of the first pass. We are now checking our remainder for a while longer. If needed, if necessary, we will report immediately and without delay. As you can clearly see, the remainder from the very first pass is excellent. Look at the truly amazing remainder from the first pass. Minerals from the renowned ice company. Where else in the world can you see this? We will now proceed to return to the very tip and roll it again in exactly the same way, creating additional and significant density. Again, from the bottom to the top, covering the entire lower boundary, block by block, we carefully move to our marks. Also, please pay close attention to the work of the highly reputable Ice Company needle. This particular and specific brand of needles with a very fine and precise tip ensures that the pigment does not splatter at all, and there is absolutely no excess waste. The application is absolutely perfect. Be sure to test new products to discover something new for yourself. We reached the apex point, secured it, and then went down again and secured it down. Here's our remainder, the perfect remainder. Can you imagine? To ensure that both eyebrows are symmetrically filled, we will work in sections. We have filled in the first tail, and now we will apply secondary anesthesia to it. The secondary anesthesia is also high-quality ice gel from Ice Company. With such movements, without smearing, it's sufficient to just dab the gel just a little bit more. It acts really very quickly. We'll leave it for now and move on to the second eyebrow. Again, we turn the client's head so that it's more convenient for us and carefully pick up our pigment. Now I sit a little at the corner of the couch and turn the eyebrow just like this in order to create a flat surface for work again, a bit more. You can do it like this, but I find it more convenient to work slightly from the angle. So we turn it like this and go again from the lower boundary with a precise stroke, covering the lower boundary, the contour, the pericontour, rolling our stroke quite superficially, capturing the upper boundary, then going back down, capturing the lower boundary, moving slightly forward in a block, but continuing to work in the same place. We move towards the upper boundary to our anchor point. We capture it, move slightly forward, and then move down as well. That is, we have a snake-like movement from bottom to top, top to bottom, bottom to top, so on. Again, the lower boundary. We just simply capture and record our contour. We carefully fold the lower boundary, and we need to reach the red mark precisely. The movement in the skin is roughly like a pendulum at 3, meaning we stay in one place for quite a while. Whenever I go to pick up pigment, I always start again either from the bottom or the top to keep everything structured. From the bottom and again with a slight overlap of blocks, we begin to move slightly up to the top. We fix the upper boundary and move downwards, going forward a little to create a smooth and seamless transition between our boundaries. Now we will also check the remainder of our tail, gently and carefully wiping it off. Always wipe carefully and thoroughly. Look, this is our first remainder. Let's go over it again to ensure it's completely clean, ensuring it's spotless and pristine. First residue is on minerals. It's perfect, we have no seams or blocks. If you have block movement with a large overlap and a slow forward exit, you will have excellent results like these, such as in order to achieve this. We will refine a little bit here along the lower boundary and move slightly upwards. In my honest opinion, it's absolutely perfect. This is the opium light mineral line from the renowned ice company. Look, here's the first pass. Why can we lay down these pigments on the very first pass? So, in theory, we can now go back and refine some aspects, achieving the specific density we want. And then not return to this place, knowing that it is absolutely, completely, and totally filled in. In this tail, the pigment has fully developed. Look at the beautiful color. That is, the mineral pigment needs to breathe to live in the skin to spread as beautifully as possible. At this very moment, we had a red boundary here, if you remember. We are currently breaking down this block into a pendulum of 3, which means essentially approximately the same density as the tail. Then, from this red point, we now move to a more dispersed pendulum of 1. We go back to capture the lower, defining boundary, working in the previous block to create a smooth transition from block to block. If it's comfortable for you, you can count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Once again, from the lower boundary. The needle pressure is certainly minimal, but the stroke is extremely sharp. Going beyond red boundary, pendulum moves once. Once we reach upper boundary. We can also take a little bit more off right now and then check our remainder to see how it looks. We capture the lower boundary. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And smoothly move upwards, making light strokes. Always start from the lower boundary. If you stopped your work, return to the lower boundary again. Fix the bottom. 1, 2, 3. Large overlap of block on block, slow movement. Then we make light strokes. 1, 2, 3, spreading our density evenly. All right, you can wipe it off again and check our remainder. Gently, carefully, slowly. Next, look, our first densest layer at the beginning of the eyebrow is almost fading out. So we start from the lower boundary, smoothly move the pendulum to 3, then switch the pendulum to 1, and here we just scatter with chaotic movements. We touch the lower boundary, and we touch the previous block. We move forward slowly and move up slowly. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Then we swing the pendulum on count of 1. Here we just spread it out. At the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Pendulum on 1. 23 times 23, 10 pendulum on 1. That is, we strictly and meticulously follow the scheme to effectively distribute our gradient. We see that our first boundary, the red one, is already approaching. We are now slightly densifying the lower boundary, making sure it is more compact and firm. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Then we have a pendulum motion, which is more sparse in terms of application, not laying it down too densely, ensuring it is spread out evenly. After this boundary, we have a sparse movement, meaning we spread it out a bit, leaving a little stroke, about ½ centimeter, making sure it is not too thick. Here again, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, then sparse, and upwards we just spread it out, making sure it is evenly distributed. All right, let's very carefully apply this secondary spread. In the same way, with these stamping motions, so that we don't lose the sketch if anything happens. It burns a little, that's it. We let the pigment settle for a bit. We continue shaping our distant eyebrow and move towards ourselves, seeing our markings where the first red dots of the lower boundary are. The shaping will be quite dense, with a pendulum motion at 3. Then, the eyebrow will have a more sparse movement. From the previous block, we again capture the lower boundary and lay it down, just slightly stepping in place. You can count to yourself 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and thus move upwards. We went to the edge of our boundary and then carefully spread our delicate and precise thin stroke. We slightly turn the eyebrow again so that it is flat towards you. From this angle, it's more convenient for me when it faces me. Again, from the lower boundary, we outline the lower boundary, the contour, and with a pendulum motion at 3, we move upwards. We lay it down quite densely. We carefully reach the boundary and then spread out a loose stroke and methodically. We move down gradually and continue moving slowly until we finally reach the bottom. You can check our current stock. Excellent and available arrangement. There's no need to come up with something to arrange the minerals at all now. Again, the lower boundary, we go from bottom to top. We go from the lower boundary again as we move a pendulum at 3, a fairly dense application up to our first boundary with red dots. And we carefully and slowly, gradually move up. Next, we move on to the layout of more sparse movements, and towards the upper boundary, we simply disperse. Let's go back and take a slightly more detailed look. And there's just a little bit left. We secure the lower boundary again. Here, in this area, we have very little indeed dense coloring. And then, immediately, we move upwards with a more sparse motion. And scattered at the very top, we go down once more again. Here, it is almost entirely air and space. We did a great job indeed. The first pass on Ice Company minerals was successfully done. Now we will apply secondary anesthesia, initially. It will burn a little, but it will work quite quickly and effectively and efficiently in a short amount of time. Minerals look beautiful in work, appearing matte on the skin we proceed. Ice Company pigments lay down perfectly with a single needle, but I also want to show you how to work with a 3-needle as an example, very carefully. We already have the base pigment applied, now we need to refine it. We set up the extension in the same way. And now we make the same movement. The module window is slightly facing away from you. I am currently using a cotton pad. I am removing the hairs away from myself so that I can see where I am working. Next, I carefully and gently hold onto the cartridge to feel it. Here we have the residue from the first pass. We are now also capturing the lower boundary. Hairs away from yourself. From the lower boundary, we go with the stroke up and above with a slight overlap, meaning a larger overlap of block on block and a slight exit. Again, I go down, clean up again carefully and precisely, catch the lower boundary, and go up with a steady and controlled motion. I reach the boundary and go down, ensuring a smooth and even application. Do you see the difference? Look at how the density of the square increases. Next, I hook the lower boundary again, the contour, the free contour. I move block by block tightly. There is a small overlap of one block over another, but a large overlap overall. And now I move upwards in a more sparse manner. I removed it. I don't work blindly. It is very convenient and comfortable for me to see what I am doing and to see our results. Starting again from the lower boundary, we're moving steadily. Remember that we are already stretching here. And with a more sparse motion, we move upwards. Just scattered slightly. Let's go. Lower boundary again, a bit. We start by laying down the material densely, ensuring that each stroke is close to the previous one, creating a solid base. After this, we make a similar stroke, but this time it is more sparse and loose, almost as if we are painting in the air. This technique helps in fixing the lower boundary while moving upwards, allowing the material to spread more sparsely. We repeat this process, focusing again on the lower boundary and spreading the material sparsely upwards. This method ensures that the lower boundary is well defined and the material is evenly distributed. Next, we will work on the beginning again, starting with the lower boundary and then applying a sparse, airy stroke. This step is crucial for creating a balanced and aesthetically pleasing result. Here, we will densify the lower boundary with a diagonal stroke, adding depth and dimension to the work. For those using mineral pigments, it is advisable to initially take 2 to 3 parts of the pigment to achieve the desired consistency and color intensity. This careful and methodical approach ensures that the final outcome is both precise and visually appealing, with each layer contributing to the overall effect. 1 a bit. Now, from the lower boundary, we will have a fan-like pattern. I don't just attach it upwards, I spread it upwards. We simply spread the lower boundaries upwards to emphasize a more balanced structure. Here, we just refine our air at the beginning to achieve a smoother, more efficient process. We roll from the tail, again going carefully against the direction of hair growth. Here, too, you can precisely adjust the density as needed. I hook the lower boundary and overlap stroke by stroke with the diagonal, creating a grid slightly. Let's see exactly where we need to report to me. To scatter all the airy pixels at the beginning, we simply make such chaotic movements. You can easily make curls, but with such a feathered and defined outline. This way, we achieve a smooth transition. Continued. And from the tail, you can also use a 3 or a 1, it doesn't matter. We do it just to show you how you can work with the edge of the module away from you and towards you. I definitely, absolutely immediately wipe it off if I need to refine something somewhere. I go again from the lower boundary up, from the upper boundary down. I catch both the lower contour and the upper contour. Otherwise, why would we draw a sketch, right? Quickly, the density is achieved with a 3. We finish the block with a small extension of the block from the block. We continue to work. That is, we leave all the density in the previous block. Again, we start from the lower boundary. The belt is strictly at the bottom. We proceed by carefully creating our additional density and volume, and then spread it closer to the top. Once again, we carefully hook the lower boundary of the material, ensuring it is secure, and then more loosely spread our connector across the designated area. From the lower boundary, we move upwards gradually and carefully, and implement more sparsely. Without applying much pressure to the skin, we are just lightly scratching the skin. Their beacons move back and forth, as if you are swaying slightly and touching the skin. And slowly, we scatter sparsely upwards like this. We catch the lower boundary and smoothly and steadily move upwards. Here, we immediately and promptly start working more lightly. Brush the hairs away from yourself. I hold a cotton pad in my left hand. It's convenient for me not to make any unnecessary movements on the table without turning. I always have a cotton pad in my hand. Again, from the lower boundary, smoothly thinned out for upward acceptance. Spread the air and return to base. Thinned out, thinned out. There, spread it out. At the very beginning of the gradient, as you may remember from our previous discussions, there is already quite a small amount of volumetric space available, and we immediately spread it upwards, creating a gradient effect. There's just a little bit left, and we found our fixed contour, went over it carefully, and then spread it upwards again, removing any stray hairs and refining the areas where we are lacking. It might be possible to finish with a diagonal stroke. Personally, I like to start from the lower boundary, gently touching the lower boundary to ensure precision. In fact, the contact with the skin is minimal, meaning the work is superficial, but because I am practically holding the cartridge, you see, I am almost controlling the cartridge. I don't hold the machine high, I am essentially gripping the cartridge. Accordingly, the movement is more brisk, not due to penetration into the skin, but because of a sufficiently energetic, vigorous, and forceful stroke. Diagonal at the lower boundary, we capture the volume. We have finished the eyebrows. Now we just need to refine the beginning. It is ready, but I will now show you more precisely how I refine it. I am already standing over the client, carefully lifting the eyebrows up like this and gently spreading them apart, barely touching the delicate skin, immediately wiping with a small, handheld fan. This way, we create a fine shadow effect. If needed, we can make precise, minute adjustments to ensure perfection. Our awesome, beautifully shaped eyebrows are ready for the client to admire and enjoy.